I had to come back.
You can't be here.
Please, just listen to me.
Why should I? Stop! Don't sign it! Look at your shirt, it's not worth it!
They say that power doesn't truly change a person. It simply acts as a magnifying glass, revealing the cracks, the flaws, and the darkest parts of their character that were there all along. I never really understood the weight of that truth until the night my wife, the woman I had devoted the last 7 years of my life to, looked me in the eye and poured a glass of wine over my chest in front of the city's entire elite class. The ballroom was dressed in gold that night, glowing under massive chandeliers that dripped with crystal and wealth, casting a shimmering light over a crowd that measured human value in stock options and headlines. Every corner of the room vibrated with excess. Liquid luxury poured into delicate fluted glasses, laughter that was sharpened by the knowledge of privilege, and smiles that only seemed to exist when billions of dollars were at stake. It wasn't just a corporate event. It was a coronation of power, the final signing of a $600 million deal that was destined to cement my wife, Vanessa, as a rising titan in the cutthroat world of real estate mergers. I stood near the back, blending into the quiet margin where the shadows clung to the walls, the place where billionaires often hide when they don't want the burden of attention. My suit was expensive, Italian silk, tailored to the millimeter, but it was unassuming, dark and simple, the kind of fabric that whispered wealth without ever feeling the need to brag about it. In that gilded room, surrounded by men and women drunk on their own status and ego, I looked like nothing more than a supportive, perhaps slightly out-of-place husband, just a man lucky enough to witness his wife's meteoric ascent into the stratosphere of high society. No one there knew the truth, not the executives clutching their scotch with manicured hands, not the hungry press photographers flashing their bulbs in blinding bursts, not the shareholders mentally calculating their dividends, and certainly not Vanessa. Tonight, she wasn't the only one being celebrated, though she was the only one basking in the applause. I owned the company acquiring hers. Every document, every legal clause, every signature, and every congratulatory handshake flowed back to me like a river returning to the ocean. But she had no idea. I wasn't standing there as the billionaire owner watching the culmination of a hidden acquisition I had orchestrated from the shadows. I was there as something else entirely, a husband studying the deep fracturing cracks in his marriage, observing the shadows behind the smiles, and cataloging the quiet, painful truths people reveal when they believe you are beneath them. Vanessa had changed over the last 2 years, slowly at first, then all at once. The way a coastline erodes under the constant pounding rhythm of the waves until the land that was once there is simply gone. She used to come home tired but soft, grateful for small victories, open-hearted even in her failures, and we would sit on the balcony of our first small apartment, sharing cheap takeout and dreaming of a life where we didn't have to worry about rent. But fame has a way of carving people into new, sharper shapes, and power has a terrifying way of burning away humility until nothing but ambition remains. Her meetings began to run later and later into the night. Her phone was locked and guarded with a paranoia that replaced intimacy, and networking became a permanent, unassailable excuse to keep me at a distance. Every time I asked how she was doing, or how her day went, she offered sharp, clipped answers laced with impatience, as if my concern was an annoyance she had to manage rather than an act of love she should cherish. It wasn't the busyness that hurt, because I understood the demands of business better than anyone in that room. It was the way she had begun looking at me. She looked at me like I was a relic of her past rather than a partner in her present. Like the man she married was no longer the man she needed to impress, but rather an anchor she was dragging along the ocean floor. I didn't correct her. I didn't remind her who funded her first firm when no bank would take her call, who paid our mortgage when the market crashed, who believed in her vision when she was crying on the bathroom floor, convinced she was a failure. I didn't remind her who I actually was. I let her believe that I was just Marcus, the quiet husband with a small business, the one who rarely talked about work, the one who gave her space to rise without competition. I had built my empire quietly, deliberately, and privately, choosing the freedom of anonymity over the shackles of the spotlight. But she didn't know that her entire empire was built on foundations I laid for her in secret. And she had absolutely no idea that tonight, the biggest deal of her career, the one she had spent months chasing with a hunger that bordered on obsession, the one she believed would elevate her above everyone in the room, was actually a deal she was making with me. My eyes followed her as she moved across the ballroom floor. She was radiant, I had to admit that. She wore a crimson dress that moved like silk fire around her body, every step a graceful command that demanded attention. People flocked to her. Investors, CEOs, social media influencers, each one eager to bask in the warm glow of her victory, hoping some of her shine would rub off on them. She laughed louder tonight, her gestures were grander, and her confidence towered over everyone she spoke to. It would have been beautiful to watch if it didn't come with a piercing coldness whenever she looked in my direction. A look that suggested she was embarrassed by me, the husband who didn't fit her new world, the man who didn't brag, who didn't flex, who didn't post pictures of private jets or penthouses on Instagram. Earlier in the evening, she had introduced me to a group of investors with a smile that never reached her eyes, saying, "Oh, this is Marcus. He runs a small tech consultancy." The words always lingered in the air, not for accuracy, but for effect. Small. It was important to her to say that word. It made her feel bigger by comparison. She didn't know the truth, that my small consultancy was the holding company for multiple global conglomerates. She didn't know that the signature going on the acquisition contract tonight, the one she believed belonged to a reclusive, legendary billionaire named L. Huxley, was actually my pen name. She didn't know that the only reason she was about to climb a golden staircase to the top of the industry was because I had built it for her, step by invisible step. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way a man who screams and throws things is angry. I was cold. I was watching, observing, waiting. The universe has a quiet, ironic way of revealing who people truly are, not through their hardships, but through their success. Give a person everything they have ever wanted, and they will show you exactly who they are inside. And Vanessa, intoxicated by the fumes of her own ascent, was showing me pieces of herself she never let me see before. Her tone had grown sharper, her patience thinner, her respect conditional on what others could do for her. And tonight, in the most elegant ballroom in the city, surrounded by the smell of expensive perfume and old money, she was about to show me one more side of herself, one I didn't expect, and one that would seal her fate. The ceremony began with applause, echoing against the marble floors and crystal walls. Executives took the stage one by one, praising Vanessa's fearless negotiation skills, her unmatched intuition, and her relentless drive. She stood between them, glowing like a queen crowned by public admiration, soaking it all in. Cameras flashed in a blinding rhythm. Champagne flowed into towers. I watched quietly, unseen, but always noticing the details others missed. When her speech began, she held the microphone tightly, like it was a scepter or a weapon. "This deal," she said with a breathless smile, her eyes scanning the crowd but skipping over me, "is not just a milestone. It's a declaration. A declaration that I am no longer the woman who needed help, who needed approval, who needed anyone to open doors for her." The crowd cheered, eating up the narrative of the self-made woman, oblivious to the irony. She continued, her voice rising with emotion. "I built this on my own. I climbed this mountain solo. My jaw didn't tighten, my expression didn't change. But there was a moment, just a flicker, when her eyes finally landed on me in the back of the room. Not with gratitude for the years of support, not with pride in our shared life, but with a subtle, dismissive smirk, as if to say, "Look at where I am now, and look at where you are." She didn't know I had walked into this world long before her. She didn't know that I was the shadow behind every deal she celebrated. She didn't know that the billionaire she admired from afar, the one she bragged to her friends about, outsmarting during negotiations, was standing 20 feet away, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching her lie to the world and to herself. When the speech ended, the real celebration began. Music swelled, laughter rose to a roar, and the ballroom transformed into a chaotic stage of excess. Vanessa walked through the crowd like a crowned royal, glasses raised in her honor, accepting compliments as if they were tithes. I stayed by the bar, content to be invisible in a room full of people obsessed with visibility. That's when it happened. A junior executive, drunk on free wine and the thrill of proximity to power, stumbled as he turned, knocking into her and spilling a splash of champagne onto the hem of her dress. She gasped dramatically, drawing attention she didn't need, turning a minor accident into a scene. She looked around, flustered, needing a target for her adrenaline, needing someone to blame to regain her composure. And then, in a move I had never seen from her before, she turned toward me. I was standing close by, holding a napkin I had instinctively picked up to help her. Her eyes narrowed, calculating, irritated and cruel in a way that wasn't playful. She walked toward me with that forced, regal calm, holding a nearly full glass of heavy red wine. Before I could speak, before I could even understand her intention, she tilted the glass forward and poured it onto my suit. The liquid hit my chest with a shocking coldness, splashing up my neck and soaking into the dark fabric. The room froze. The music seemed to dim into background noise as the collective breath of the crowd was held. I felt the wetness of the wine spreading across my shirt, dripping down the fabric like blood from a wound, a stain of deep, violent crimson. Her voice cut through the moment, sharp, dismissive, loud enough for the board members and the press to hear clearly. "Marcus, try to be careful. You're embarrassing me." A soft gasp ran through the crowd. Someone whispered, scandalous and delighted. Another laughed nervously. Vanessa turned away, already dismissing the scene like it was nothing more than a clumsy husband ruining her aesthetic. She had framed me. She had poured the wine, then blamed me, using me as a prop to assert her dominance, to show the room that she was the alpha, and I was just the baggage she carried. She didn't know, she couldn't know, that she had just poured wine on the one man who owned every contract in that room. She didn't know that her humiliation wasn't falling on a powerless husband. It was falling on the billionaire she was unknowingly indebted to. I looked down at the stain, feeling the damp fabric against my skin, then slowly raised my eyes to the crowd. Some pitied me, some judged me, but none of them knew the truth. And Vanessa, she had no idea what she had just awakened. For a long moment, the ballroom felt suspended, like the air itself hesitated to move, unsure whether to carry the sound of laughter or the tension that had just cracked through the room. Red wine dripped from my shirt sleeve to the marble floor, each drop sounding like a gunshot in my own ears, louder than the murmurs gathering at the edges of the crowd. And yet, Vanessa kept walking, a queen who believed she had just punished a servant who dared to misstep. Conversations gradually resumed, but they carried a different tone now. Whispers steeped in judgment, amusement, and cheap superiority. People love a spectacle, especially when they think they've witnessed someone's fall. And I was the designated victim of the night. I didn't speak. I didn't chase her to argue. I didn't defend myself against the lie. Instead, I dabbed the stain with a white linen napkin offered by a trembling waiter who looked at me with genuine sympathy, and I stayed exactly where I was. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest response. And because I knew something no one else in that glittering room knew. This empire she thought she was rising into was built by the man she publicly dismissed. Vanessa didn't even look back. She blended back into laughter and flashing cameras, her ego swelling with every congratulatory pat on the back. She didn't understand power, the kind that stays quiet, steady, and patient. She only recognized the version of power that sparkled under chandeliers and appeared in glossy magazines. And maybe that assumption was what emboldened her tonight, what allowed her to think pouring wine on me was a harmless display of dominance, a moment to remind herself and everyone else that she was above me. But the thing about arrogance is that it blinds people. It makes them bold in the wrong ways, cruel at the wrong times, and confident about the wrong assumptions. I excused myself quietly, moving toward the private balcony overlooking the city skyline. The heavy glass doors shut out the noise of the party, and the cold night air hit my chest sharply, a relief from the stifling heat inside. From the balcony, I could see the skyscrapers glowing like giants draped in jewels, the very skyline that had watched me build my empire brick by hidden brick over the last decade. I placed my hand on the railing and inhaled deeply, letting the chill settle my pulse. Not anger, clarity, not revenge, revelation. Tonight wasn't about making Vanessa pay. It was about finally seeing her clearly. It was about realizing that the woman I had supported, believed in, and cherished for years had evolved into someone who couldn't recognize love unless it came attached to a price tag, status, or applause. And I didn't hate her for it. I just knew something fundamental. Truth reveals itself eventually, and hers was unfolding right before me. I stayed outside long enough to let the noise fade, watching the traffic below, feeling the city breathe. When I returned to the ballroom, the signing ceremony was moments away. The atmosphere had shifted from chaotic celebration to business-like anticipation. A long mahogany table sat center stage, documents placed neatly on top, expensive pens arranged with precision. Executives gathered, photographers aimed their cameras, and Vanessa stood at the front, beaming, radiant, and utterly certain of her triumph. The CEO of the acquisition company, Richard Hale, stood beside her. His silver hair gleamed beneath the lights, his tailored suit impossibly crisp. But beneath his polished exterior, Richard was nothing more than a placeholder, a figure I had positioned years ago to represent one of my holding companies. He was the perfect face for the empire I preferred to control from afar, loyal to a fault and excellent at playing the part. Vanessa adored him, admired him, even idolized him. She once told me over dinner that Richard was the kind of man she wished I would learn from, the kind of killer instinct she thought I lacked. She didn't know he reported to me every single morning at 6 a.m. Richard tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, we are moments away from finalizing one of the largest acquisitions in the city's history. Please join me in welcoming the brilliant, unstoppable force behind this deal, Ms. Vanessa Caldwell. Applause erupted like thunder. Vanessa stepped forward, smiling with practiced grace, absorbing the adoration. "Thank you," she said, her voice dripping with victory. "This deal is more than a merger. It's a declaration of independence." The crowd cheered again, unaware of the irony cutting through the air like a silent blade. My presence didn't matter to them. I was a footnote in the story playing out on stage, until Richard continued. "Before we proceed, our executive board chair will arrive shortly to oversee the final signing." The room straightened instantly. People whispered, "The elusive board chair." Vanessa perked up, eyes glimmering with a new level of excitement. She had spent months trying to impress him, sending reports, suggestions, invitations to dinner. But the board chair never responded. He never appeared in public. He was an urban myth, a ghost, a power that didn't need a face. I watched her excitement grow, the anticipation practically vibrating off her. "He's finally showing up?" she asked Richard, unable to hide her thrill, her voice caught by the microphone. "Yes," Richard replied, glancing toward the entrance with a knowing look. "He insisted on being here personally." Vanessa's pulse visibly quickened. For her, this was the summit, approval from the ghost billionaire himself. The ballroom doors opened. The sound didn't crack like thunder. It didn't roar. It simply shifted the air. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Heads turned. Photographers froze, cameras poised but unsure where to aim. Vanessa looked toward the entrance, her breath catching in her throat as the board chair stepped inside. Me. I walked in with calm, steady steps. Not rushed, not theatrical. I didn't need drama. The truth walking into a room is dramatic enough. I was still wearing the wine-stained shirt, the mark of her disrespect branded on my chest like a medal of war. I approached the stage, eyes locked on Vanessa. Her smile faltered, confusion blooming across her features like a bruise. She blinked once, twice. Her jaw slackened. She glanced at Richard, expecting him to call security or laugh at the joke. Instead, Richard bowed his head respectfully toward me. The room bowed with him. Vanessa's chest heaved subtly, her breath suddenly uneven, panic setting in behind her eyes. I reached the table, slid my fingers along the smooth mahogany edge, and extended my hand to Richard. "Thank you, Richard," I said. My voice carried through the microphone, low, controlled, certain. Vanessa stared at me like she had seen a ghost wearing my face. Her voice cracked when she finally whispered, loudly enough for the front row to hear, "Marcus, what are you doing?" I looked at her, calm, unreadable, stripping away the mask of the simple husband she thought she knew. "Overseeing my company's acquisition," I replied gently. Silence drowned the room. Dark, heavy, breath-stealing silence. It was the kind of silence where careers end and realities shatter. Vanessa shook her head, eyes darting between me and the documents. "Your company," she whispered, a nervous laugh bubbling up. "You mean your consultancy? Marcus, stop this." A soft ripple of laughter broke somewhere in the back, people unsure if this was a skit. I didn't flinch. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "The parent company." I tapped the contract bearing the signature line for L. Huxley, chairman. "This one." Her breath hitched. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" Her voice trembled, not with fear yet, but with total disbelief. I leaned in just enough for her to hear me clearly, though the microphone picked up every syllable. "Vanessa, I am L. Huxley." The world collapsed for her in that second. I could see it happen in real time. I could see it in the way her face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of pale. I could see it in the way her knees subtly weakened, forcing her to grab the table for support. I could see it in the way her eyes filled with a storm of confusion, betrayal, and dawning realization. She stepped back, bumping into the table. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible." I held her gaze, unrelenting. "It's been possible for the last 12 years." She tried to find the ground beneath her, but it kept shifting. Why didn't you tell me?" She breathed, the fight draining out of her. "Because you never wanted to know," I answered softly. "You were too busy building a world where you thought you no longer needed me." A pin drop could have echoed in that room. Vanessa's lips trembled. Her eyes glossed with emotions too tangled to name. Shame, shock, fear. "Marcus, I didn't mean—" I held up a hand, stopping her. "We'll talk after the signing." The signing resumed, but the energy in the room had changed completely. Control returned to me, not through force, but through truth. When the pens were passed around, Vanessa's fingers shook so visibly that Richard reached forward to steady the folder for her. And in that moment, her eyes lifted to mine, filled with realization, regret, and a sudden, overwhelming fear of losing something she hadn't valued until now. When it was my turn to sign, I did so with calm assurance. The final flourish of my pen sealed the fate of the merger and sealed something else too. Vanessa's understanding of who she had married. After the signing, applause rose again, but it was hesitant, fragmented, confused by the shift in power dynamics. The crowd didn't know whether to cheer for her or stare at me. Vanessa remained frozen, her eyes glued to the floor. When I approached, she lifted her gaze slightly. "Marcus," she whispered, "please, can we talk?" Her voice had changed. Gone was the pride. Gone was the superiority. Only vulnerability remained. "Not here," I said quietly. "Follow me." I turned and walked toward the exit, not checking to see if she followed. I knew she would. We walked to a private executive lounge down the hall, far from the curious eyes of the crowd and the flashing cameras. The room was luxurious, silent, dimly lit, a sharp contrast to the chaos we had just left. As soon as the heavy door clicked shut, sealing us in, Vanessa's composure shattered. I didn't know, she whispered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Marcus, please. I didn't know it was your company. I didn't know you were... him. That I wasn't who you thought? I interrupted, leaning against the oak desk. Or that I wasn't something you could control? She winced, the truth stinging. That's not fair, she started. No, I said, my voice sharp with clarity, cutting her off. What wasn't fair was the way you treated me long before you knew who I really was. You poured wine on me tonight, Vanessa. In front of the entire city. You humiliated me to prove something. But what exactly were you proving? That I wasn't enough for you? That you had outgrown the man who helped build your career, your confidence, your dreams? Vanessa shook her head, pacing the small room. I was angry. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking. You were thinking just fine, I replied. You were thinking about power, about image, about who looked valuable standing next to you. It wasn't anger, Vanessa. It was choice. You chose to make me small so you could feel big. She gripped the back of a leather chair, her knuckles white. Just give me a chance to explain. Marcus, I still love you. The air throbbed with the weight of that lie. Or perhaps it was her truth, but a truth that arrived too late to matter. I tilted my head slightly. Do you? Do you love me? Or did you love the version of me you thought you could look down on? Did you love me, or did you love having someone safe waiting at home while you played the superstar? She opened her mouth, but no words came, and that was answer enough. Start talking, I said, crossing my arms. Say whatever you think will change this. She inhaled shakily. Marcus, I married you because I loved you. Truly. But over the years, it felt like we were stuck. You didn't want more. I was climbing, pushing, trying to make something of myself. And you seemed content with less. Less? I repeated quietly. She flinched. I mean, less ambition, less drive. But hunger for what? I asked. Status? Applause? Money? I wasn't chasing those things because I already had them. You saw calm and mistook it for weakness. You saw stability and mistook it for stagnation. And instead of asking yourself why I was so content, you decided I must be beneath you. Her face crumpled. Marcus, I made mistakes, but not because I didn't care about you. Yes, I said softly. You made mistakes because you cared more about the world seeing you with the right man than actually being with the right man. Silence settled again, deep, painful, revealing. Vanessa wiped her tears, her voice cracking. Is there any chance we can fix this? I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the woman I fell in love with, buried under layers of ego and insecurity. But I also saw the woman who poured wine on me an hour ago. Let me ask you something, I said, stepping closer. If I were truly the man you thought I was, average income, middle-class job, no wealth, no power, would you still be begging to fix this right now? Or would you be back in that ballroom, laughing about your clumsy husband with your rich friends? Her lips parted. Tears froze. She couldn't answer. She couldn't lie. The silence stretched out, damning her more than any words could. I nodded slowly. I thought so. Marcus, please, she whispered, reaching out a hand. I don't want to lose you. You already lost me, I said gently, stepping back out of her reach. Long before tonight. She broke at those words. Her shoulders collapsed. She realized that the greatest loss wasn't the merger or the money or the reputation. It was the man who had stood by her when she had nothing. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely audible, staring at the floor. I turned toward the door. "I'll have someone contact you about the divorce settlement tomorrow. You'll be taken care of financially. I'm not cruel. But this marriage is over." "Divorce?" she gasped, looking up with wide, terrified eyes. "Marcus, I can change. I'll do better, please." I paused, looking back one last time, engraving this moment in my memory. "Vanessa, you didn't just pour wine on me tonight. You poured contempt on our entire marriage. You didn't lose me because of who I am. You lost me because of who you became." A sob ripped through her, raw and uncontrolled. I reached for the door handle. "Where are you going?" she cried out, taking a step forward. "To my real board meeting," I said quietly. "The one I didn't want you to find out about like this. And to the people who actually value me, without needing a price tag to do it." I walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing in the middle of the luxury she had chased so blindly, alone in a room that symbolized everything she wanted and everything she had lost. I walked down the corridor with a quiet, steady stride. For the first time in years, I felt free. Hurt, yes. Betrayed, certainly. But free. Free from the need to shrink myself to make someone else feel big. Free from the burden of loving someone who only loved what I could do for them, not who I was. As I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed. It was Lillian, my COO. The message was simple. "We're ready for you, Mr. Huxley." I allowed a faint smile to stretch across my lips. Mr. Huxley, my real name, my real identity. A title not of power alone, but of quiet self-worth. I stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut behind me, sealing away the echoes of a marriage built on fragile illusions. As the elevator rose smoothly toward the top floor, I exhaled slowly, feeling the last pieces of my old life fall away. I didn't know what the future held. New partnerships, new beginnings, maybe even new love. But I knew one thing for certain. I would never again apologize for being a man whose value couldn't be measured by anyone else's ambition. And somewhere below me, in a silent executive lounge filled with regret, Vanessa was finally understanding the hardest lesson of all. The moment she tried to show the world she didn't need me was the moment she proved she never deserved me.